Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Saturday, January 24th, 2026. And, I was looking at the calendar this morning, and it just struck me how fast the last, say, decade has flown by.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. But if there's been one constant, one headline that has just been glued to the front of every paper, the top of every feed, and right at the center of the cultural conversation for that entire time, it's the subject of today's deep dive.
It would be genuinely difficult to find a single person in the English-speaking world who doesn't have an opinion on him.
Oh, impossible, I'd argue. We are talking, of course, about Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. And the reason we're doing this today, specifically today, here in early 2026, is because the sheer volume of news around him, it hasn't slowed down at all. If anything, it's just become this deafening roar.
Really has.
You just look at the last few months alone. You've got major legal rulings, you've got these charity shakeups, political comments. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think the reason it feels so intense right now is that we're seeing a kind of culmination of choices that were made 5, maybe 6 years ago. The dust isn't settling. It's actually being kicked up into a storm.
Exactly. And that is the hook for me. That's what I find so fascinating when I was reading through this mountain of sources you sent over, which is massive, by the way.
It's quite a stack.
It is. I just kept coming back to the contradictions. The guy is a figure of such massive contradictions.
What do you mean?
Well, just think about it for a second. He's a prince of the blood, right? Born into the ultimate goldfish bowl of the British monarchy. He leaves that entire institution explicitly to find privacy and to protect his family.
His stated goal.
It's a stated goal. And then he releases Spare, which becomes the fastest-selling nonfiction book of all time, and it details the most intimate, sometimes excruciatingly private moments of his life and his family's lives.
It's a fundamental conflict, isn't it? Leave me alone, but first buy my book.
Exactly. And then you have the other side of it. He's a decorated soldier. Captain Wales, a guy who flew Apache helicopters in a war zone. But now he's viewed by, half the world as this controversial media figure living in California, cutting deals with Netflix. It's a fascinating disconnect.
It really is. It has the arc of a tragic hero in some classical sense, or, perhaps it's just the very messy, very public reality of a modern celebrity life. You've got the wild child of the early 2000s, the war hero of the 2010s, and now what some of the critics are calling the Duke of Montecito.
Okay, so here is our mission for today. We have a lot to get through. We have a comprehensive biography that literally takes us from his birth in 1984 all the way to, last week.
Yeah, we have court judgments from late 2025, Charity Commission reports. It's all in there.
So we're going to try to move past the tabloid froth. I really don't care about who wore what to which gala.
Agreed. Let's leave the fashion critiques to the fashion blog.
We want to understand the arc of this life. How did Captain Wales, the war hero, become the Harry we see today? We need to analyze those key turning points: the military, the marriage, the exit, and of course, the fallout.
And to understand the present, especially this really complicated, really litigious present of 2026, you absolutely have to go back to the foundation. You have to understand the architecture of his childhood.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this. Segment 1, the making of the Spare. And that word, it's not just a book title, is it? It was his reality from the second he took his first breath.
It really was. Born September 15th, 1984, Henry Charles Albert David. He was the second son of the then Prince of Wales and Diana, Princess of Wales. And in the, let's call it the brutal, cold calculus of a hereditary monarchy, you have the heir, that's William, and you have the spare.
It sounds so medieval when you put it like that.
It is medieval. That's the whole point. The system requires an heir to continue the bloodline, and it requires a spare just in case, something tragic were to happen to the heir.
A backup.
A constitutional backup. But once the heir grows up and has children of his own, which William did, of course, the spare becomes, in a way, mathematically redundant.
And Harry was aware of this from a young age.
Oh, painfully so. He's spoken about it at length. But what I found really interesting in the research is that this wasn't just, an emotional feeling. It was financially codified. It was written into the family's finances.
This blew my mind. The Queen Mother's trust funds.
Right. So their great-grandmother, the Queen Mother, she established these trust funds for both boys. And when you look at the details, Harry actually received a significantly larger share of that specific pot of money than William did.
Which seems so counterintuitive, doesn't it? Usually the older brother gets everything.
In the aristocracy, yes. But the logic here was actually quite clear. William was going to be king. William would inherit the Duchy of Cornwall, which is a billion-pound estate that generates tens of millions in profit every single year.
So William was set.
William gets the throne, William gets the palaces, William gets the history books.
So the extra cash for Harry was what? A consolation prize. Sorry, you're not going to be king. Here's some money.
Essentially, yes. It was the family's way of trying to balance the scales. It was a recognition that you don't get the destiny, so here's a little extra financial cushion. It highlights that from day one, everyone knew Harry's path would be different. He would need to fend for himself in a way that William never, ever would.
But no amount of trust fund money can insulate a child from real trauma, and we absolutely cannot talk about Harry without talking about 1997.
Diana.
He was 12 years old. He was at Balmoral Castle in Scotland when it happened.
And his father, Charles, has to come into his room and tell him that his mother has died in a car crash in Paris.
The impact of that, look, losing a parent is devastating for any child, but the way it happened and the immediate aftermath, it's almost inconceivable.
The public nature of it is what separates it from, what we might call normal grief. And the specific image that I think is burned into the collective consciousness of the entire world is the funeral. The walk behind the cortege. You have a 12-year-old boy, Harry, walking through the streets of London behind a gun carriage that is bearing his mother's body.
And he's flanked by his grandfather, Prince Philip, his father, Charles, his 15-year-old brother, William, and his uncle, Charles Spencer.
And there are millions of people lining the streets, just wailing, throwing flowers, and then billions more watching on television around the globe.
Can you even imagine?
No. He has spoken about this in recent years, specifically describing just the sound of the horse's hooves on the pavement and the constant wailing of the crowd. He called it a genetic pain and suffering.
And he mentioned that for a long, long time, he just blocked it out completely. He said he just didn't think about her.
That's a classic trauma response, isn't it? Dissociation. He said he couldn't cry. He cried once at the burial and then not again for years and years. But when you bottle that kind of thing up, it comes out sideways.
And that brings us directly to the wild child phase. Because if you were reading the papers in the early 2000s, Harry was a chaotic figure.
He was acting out, he was angry, and he was doing it all under this incredibly intense microscope.
So for his education, he went to Eton College. Now that was unusual, wasn't it? The Windsor men, like Philip and Charles, they all went to Gordonstoun in Scotland.
Which is famously tough, known for cold showers, brutal morning runs, all about character building. I think Charles called it coldits and kilts.
Right. But Harry went to Eton, which is, just down the road from Windsor Castle. That was the Spencer tradition, right? Diana's family went there.
Correct. But Harry, well, let's just say he wasn't exactly setting the world on fire as an academic scholar.
I saw his A-level results in the notes. He got a B in art and a D in geography.
And even that B in art was surrounded by controversy.
The cheating allegations.
This was a huge story at the time. An art teacher at Eton, a woman named Sarah Forsyth, she alleged that she was essentially bullied by the school administration into helping Harry cheat on his A-level art project.
She said he couldn't have done it himself.
She claimed he was a weak student and that she basically did a lot of the work.
Did anything ever come of that legally?
Well, there was an employment tribunal. It ultimately cleared Harry of the cheating allegation itself, meaning he didn't knowingly cheat. But the tribunal did accept that he had received help in preparing the project. So it was this very murky gray area.
But the narrative it solidified was that Harry wasn't the smart one.
Exactly. You have William the golden boy off to St. Andrews University, and then you have Harry, the one who's just scraping by.
And then came the partying, the underage drinking, the smoking.
The Highgrove sessions. He was, 16, 17? Drinking at the local pubs, smoking cannabis at his father's country estate, Highgrove.
And Charles actually got a lot of credit for how he handled that, didn't he?
He did, yeah. It was seen as very modern parenting at the time. Charles sent Harry to Featherstone Lodge, which is a drug rehabilitation center, just for a day.
Right, not as a patient, but to talk to people.
Exactly, to talk to recovering heroin and cocaine addicts. He wanted Harry to see the real, ugly consequences of addiction firsthand.
It seemed to work for a bit, or at least the press kind of laid off him. But then we get to 2005. The costume party.
Oh, the colonial and native-themed party.
Which, first of all, who throws a party with that theme in 2005?
It was a different time, but not that different. It was already in incredibly poor taste. But Harry shows up wearing a Nazi Africa Corps uniform, complete with a swastika armband.
I remember that photo so clearly. The Sun put it right on the front page, Harry the Nazi.
It was a global scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. You have the grandson of the Queen, who served in World War II, wearing the uniform of the enemy,
Yeah.
Jewish rights groups, politicians, veterans. Everyone was justifiably appalled.
He apologized, of course. He had to.
He issued a statement saying it was a very stupid thing to do, but the damage was done. It made him look reckless, deeply insensitive, and just historically illiterate.
And sadly, that wasn't the only time he was caught using really offensive language or imagery. There was that video that surfaced in 2009.
Right, and this was footage that he'd filmed himself back in 2006 when he was a cadet at Sandhurst. He was filming his platoon mates.
And he used some slurs.
He did. He zoomed in on a fellow officer cadet of South Asian descent and called him our little Paki friend. Later in the same video, he saw another soldier who was wearing a scarf over his head and called him a raghead.
Wow. Hearing those words now is genuinely shocking.
It was shocking then, too.
Yeah.
I mean, David Cameron, who was the leader of the opposition at the time, called it completely unacceptable. The Ministry of Defense had to launch a formal inquiry. Harry was forced to undergo this intense diversity training.
So by the time he's in his early 20s, the public perception is pretty much set, isn't it? This guy is a liability. He's a party animal. He's offensive. He's lost.
He was spiraling. You can see it. He desperately needed structure. He needed a purpose that wasn't just being the spare.
And he found it. He found it in the military. This brings us to segment 2, the transformation. He has said himself that his 10 years in the Army were the happiest times of his life.
Absolutely. For 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, he wasn't His Royal Highness Prince Henry of Wales. He was just Captain Wales.
It all started at Sandhurst.
The Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. It's the elite training ground for British Army officers. And the thing about Sandhurst is, the drill sergeants really don't care who your grandmother is. If your boots aren't polished, you get screamed at just like everyone else.
And I think he loved that anonymity.
He thrived on it. For the first time, he was in a true meritocracy. He could physically do the work. He was good with the other guys. It was the brotherhood he'd been missing his whole life.
But the big question hanging over everything was always, can you actually send a prince to war?
It was a logistical and security nightmare. In 2007, there was this massive, very public plan to send him to Iraq. But then the insurgents publicly stated they would make him a primary target. They wanted to kidnap or kill the third in line to the British throne.
And General Sir Richard Dannatt, who was the head of the Army, he eventually said no, right?
He did. He made the call and said the risk to the men serving with Harry was just too high. Harry was a magnet for bullets, and it wasn't fair to his unit.
And Harry was furious at that. He famously said he wouldn't drag his sorry ass through Sandhurst just to sit at a desk in London.
He threatened to quit the army entirely. So the palace and the Ministry of Defense, they went back to the drawing board, and they hatched a secret plan.
The first Afghanistan deployment?
Late 2007, they sent him to Helmand Province as a forward air controller. His job was on the ground, calling in airstrikes on Taliban positions. But the condition, the absolute non-negotiable condition, was a total media blackout.
This is what fascinates me about that period. Every single newspaper editor in London knew. The broadcasters at the BBC and ITN knew, and they all agreed to say nothing.
It just shows you the relationship between the palace and the press back then. It was a different world. They could still make a deal like that. They kept the secret for 10 weeks to keep him safe.
Until the blackout broke?
An Australian magazine called New Idea, and then a German newspaper, they published the story. And once it was out everywhere.
And he had to be pulled out immediately.
Literally within hours. He was on a plane back to the UK. He was devastated. He felt like he was abandoning his team, his brothers. But that taste of combat, it changed him. He knew he wanted to go back.
But he couldn't go back as a ground controller. He was too easy a target.
Right. So he went up. He retrained as an Apache helicopter pilot.
The front seat, right. Co-pilot guy.
Exactly. The person who controls the weapon systems.
And he went back in 2012.
For a 20-week tour. And he was in the thick of it. I mean, the Apache is a fearsome attack helicopter. And this leads to another one of those slightly controversial Harry moments. In an interview he gave during that tour, he compared firing the weapons to playing video games.
I'm essentially a joypad user, I think was the exact quote.
It was. And for some, that played right into the out-of-touch prince who doesn't understand the gravity of war narrative. But for others, it was just, a soldier being brutally honest about the sanitized nature of modern technology and warfare.
But the real controversy about his service didn't come until much, much later. It came in the book, Spare.
The kill count.
He wrote, plain as day, that he had killed 25 Taliban fighters.
And he described them not as people, but as chess pieces. that had been removed from the board. He said you can't think of them as people if you want to pull the trigger and stay sane.
The reaction to that specific passage was just visceral.
It was. Senior military figures, retired colonels, commanders, guys who had been in charge came out and said, we just don't do that. You don't brag about a kill count. You don't treat it like a scorecard. It violates the unwritten professional code of a soldier.
And worse, it was a massive security risk, wasn't it?
A huge one. The Taliban actually issued a statement condemning him by name. It basically put a fresh target on his back and on the backs of British soldiers years after he had left the service.
And that soldier identity, it's still so core to who he is. We saw it flare up just this month, in January 2026.
The comments about NATO.
Right. So Donald Trump made some comments questioning the value of NATO allies, which is pretty standard rhetoric for him by now. But Harry responded.
Which is very, very rare. Royals, even former senior royals, they usually stay completely out of geopolitics. But Harry released a statement, a personal statement, saying that the sacrifices of NATO troops must be spoken about truthfully and with respect.
It was a direct rebuttal, no question.
It absolutely was. And it shows that he still considers himself part of that military brotherhood. He feels a profound duty to defend the soldier, even if he can no longer officially wear the uniform.
And the ultimate expression of that duty, of course, is the Invictus Games.
Without a doubt. Launched in 2014, he was inspired by the Warrior Games in the U.S., and he brought the concept to the U.K. and then made it global. It's an international sporting event for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women, both serving and veterans.
It was a masterstroke, wasn't it?
It was his redemption. In one move, it completely changed the narrative from party prince to humanitarian leader. It gave him a legacy that was entirely his own, separate from the monarchy.
And it was during this high point, this period where he was arguably the most popular royal in the entire country, that his personal life took the turn that would change history. Segment 3, love, marriage, and Megxit.
Before we get to Meghan, we should probably briefly mention the serious relationships before her. Chelsea Davy and Cressida Bonas.
Right, they were long-term girlfriends.
Years. Chelsea Davy for about 6 years, Cressida for about 2. But both relationships ultimately ended for pretty much the same reason.
The Goldfish Bowl.
The Goldfish Bowl. The story goes that Chelsea Davy attended the wedding of William and Kate in 2011, saw the absolute insanity of the press coverage and the lack of freedom, and basically said, this is not the life for me. She wanted a career. She wanted privacy.
So Harry was looking for someone who could handle it, or maybe someone who didn't fully know what they were getting into.
Enter Meghan Markle, summer of 2016.
They met on a blind date in London? Or was it through Instagram? The story seems to change.
It's a bit of both, from their telling. A mutual friend set them up, but they had sort of seen each other via social media. Meghan was, of course, an American actress starring in the TV show Suits. She was divorced, she was mixed race, she was an outspoken feminist.
She was, in many ways, everything the British monarchy usually wasn't.
And initially, that was seen as really exciting, a breath of fresh air. But the press coverage turned toxic almost immediately.
And this is a pivotal moment in the entire Harry timeline, November 2016.
The statement.
Yes. Usually, the palace just ignores gossip. Their mantra for a century has been, never complain, never explain. But Harry instructed his communications secretary to release this blistering statement.
He attacked the racial undertones of the comment pieces. He attacked the outright sexism and racism of social media trolls. He attacked the photographers who were literally besieging her mother's house. It was a declaration of war on the press.
He was drawing a very clear line in the sand. He was saying, I failed to protect my mother from this. I will not fail to protect this woman.
Exactly. That core trauma from 1997 was driving the bus. No question about it.
They get married in May 2018. It was a spectacular, beautiful event at Windsor. They become the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And for a moment, it really felt like a genuine modernization of the monarchy.
It did. But we now know that behind the scenes, the structure was already rotting. They were living at Kensington Palace, then they moved to Frogmore Cottage. There were endless reports of rifts with William and Kate, the so-called dueling households. Stories about Meghan making Kate cry or Kate making Meghan cry. It was nonstop.
And the staff turnover, the bullying allegations.
That was huge. Senior staff were quitting in droves. There was talk of a Sussex Survivors Club. The atmosphere, by all accounts, was poisonous.
And then the break. January 8th, 2020. The Instagram post that shocked the world.
They announced, without consulting the Queen, that they were stepping back as senior members of the royal family.
They wanted a kind of hybrid model, right? A half-in, half-out role.
That's what they proposed. They wanted to be financially independent, but still support the Queen, by carrying out some royal duties. They wanted to keep their titles and their security, but also be free to earn money commercially.
And the institution, the firm, said absolutely not.
The Sandringham Summit. The Queen, Charles, and William sat Harry down and they laid down the law. You cannot monetize the monarchy. You are either in, serving the public 100%, or you are out. There is no middle ground.
So they chose out.
They chose freedom.
Yeah.
But the price of that freedom was immense.
Okay, let's talk about that price, because it really does set up everything that happens over the next 5 years.
First, they lost the use of their HRH titles, His or Her Royal Highness. Second, and this one devastated Harry, he lost his honorary military appointments. Captain General of the Royal Marines was a huge one.
And the money?
This is the absolute key to understanding everything that followed. 95% of their income had come from the Duchy of Cornwall, which is Charles's private estate. That was cut off. Cold.
Just gone.
Gone overnight.
Yeah.
So suddenly, they're living in Tyler Perry's mansion in Los Angeles, then buying a massive $14 million estate in Montecito. They have a security bill that runs into the millions of dollars per year, and they have zero income.
That pressure cooker explains what happens next. Segment 4. The commercial era, or as some of the tabloids called it, the media wars.
And they had to make money.
Yeah.
And they had to make a lot of it fast.
So they went straight to the streamers, Netflix.
The rumored $100 million deal, and, of course, Spotify.
So let's look at the output from those deals. The Harry and Meghan docuseries on Netflix that came out in late 2022.
That was a massive hit for Netflix. Record-breaking viewing numbers. It was sleek. It was emotional. It was their side of the story. It did exactly what Netflix paid all that money for.
But the rest of the output has been, what, mixed?
Mixed at best. The Spotify deal completely collapsed in 2023 after just one season of Meghan's podcast, Archetypes. A senior Spotify executive, Bill Simmons, went on his own podcast and publicly called them heffing grifters.
That was a really low point for them, wasn't it?
It was a PR disaster. And even more recently, in December of 2024, Harry produced a documentary about polo for Netflix.
And how did that do?
It flopped. It didn't chart well. The critics called it tone-deaf and elitist.
Yeah.
A show about rich people riding horses while the rest of the world is dealing with inflation and global crises. It just didn't resonate.
But the biggest commercial product, and the one that did the most damage to his family relationships, was the book, Spare.
January 2023. Ghostwritten by J.R. Moehringer, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner. And you can tell it's a beautifully written book.
Yeah.
But the content, my goodness.
It was scorched earth.
He went after everyone. He detailed a physical fight he had with William, where he claims William knocked him to the floor, breaking a dog bowl under his back. He accused his stepmother, Camilla, of leaking stories to the press for years to rehabilitate her own image.
And the really personal stuff.
Yeah.
The frostbitten penis anecdote at his brother's wedding. The extensive drug use.
Cocaine, magic mushrooms at Courtney Cox's house, ayahuasca. He stripped away every last shred of royal mystery.
Why do you think he did that? What was the goal?
I think he genuinely felt that he had been silenced and his story had been twisted by the press for 35 years. He wanted to correct the record. He wanted to own his story. But in doing so, he pretty much burned the bridge back to his family to the ground.
And those admissions, specifically about the drugs, they created a brand new legal nightmare for him in the U.S.
The Heritage Foundation lawsuit.
Okay, explain this one, because it's a little bit technical, but it is so important to his current situation.
The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C. They filed a Freedom of Information lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security. Their argument was pretty simple. Every U.S. visa application asks, have you ever violated any law relating to controlled substances?
And if you say yes to that,
you are usually deemed inadmissible. You would need a special waiver to get in. If you say no, but you've just published a global bestseller saying you did lots of drugs, then you've potentially lied to the federal government, which is a deportable offense.
So they wanted to see his application.
Exactly. They wanted to know what he wrote and if he got special treatment because he's a prince.
And this got very political very fast.
Oh, yeah. Donald Trump weighed in back in February 2025. He did an interview and said, I wouldn't protect him. I'd leave him alone. The implication being that if he were to become president again, Harry could be deported.
The documents were eventually unsealed in March of 2025, right?
They were. But they were so heavily redacted that it was almost pointless. We still don't know for sure what he checked on that box, but the fact that a British prince's immigration status became a political football in the U.S. election cycle just shows you how far he's traveled from Buckingham Palace.
And at the same time he was fighting to stay in the U.S., he was suing half of Fleet Street back in London.
The Privacy Crusades. She launched a whole series of lawsuits against the British tabloids. He sued Mirror Group newspapers for extensive phone hacking. And he won.
That was a huge moment for him.
A massive vindication. In December 2023, a high court judge ruled that he had been hacked, and crucially, that senior editors, including Piers Morgan, knew all about it.
It proved he wasn't just being paranoid.
It did. It proved that the paranoia he felt for years was justified. They really were listening to his voicemails.
And he settled with the Sun's publisher in January 2025.
For a huge payout. We don't know the exact figure, but the reports suggest millions.
But the one big legal battle he lost was the one over his police protection, the RAVHC case.
And I think this is the one that really hurts him the most. He sued the Home Office because the committee known as RAVHC removed his automatic taxpayer-funded police security when he stepped back from royal duties.
And he offered to pay for it himself, which to a lot of people sounds reasonable. I'll pay for the police.
It does on the surface.
Yeah.
But the High Court said no. They ruled that you cannot privately fund public police officers. It creates a dangerous two-tier system where the rich can essentially buy their own private police force, and that's not how British justice works.
So he lost that case.
He lost. And his appeal was rejected in May 2025.
And I read somewhere that the legal costs for the taxpayer just to defend that one case were over £500,000.
Over £500,000, which, as you can imagine, did not endear him to the British public, who were dealing with a massive cost-of-living crisis at the time.
Wow. So that brings us right up to the present day, segment 5, the state of affairs in late 2025 and January 2026. Because recently, even the charity work, which was always the one thing that was sort of bulletproof for him, has started to look pretty shaky.
It's been a very rough 6 months for Brand Sussex.
Okay, let's start with Centibel. This is the charity he co-founded in Lesotho to help children with HIV. I mean, this is his baby. It's his heart and soul.
It is. But in March 2025, he resigned as patron. And it was not a happy, amicable handover.
There was a dispute.
A massive governance dispute with the charity's chair, a woman named Sophie Chandauka. She publicly accused Harry of, and I'm quoting from the reports here, harassment and bullying at scale.
That word again, bullying. We heard it from the palace staff, and now here it is again.
Exactly. She claimed he used imperious language. She said he sent nasty, demanding notes to staff.
Did the Charity Commission get involved in the UK?
They did. They launched an investigation, and they reported back in August 2025. Now, to be fair to Harry, their report found no evidence of systemic bullying. Yeah. But they did note there had been poor governance, and they acknowledged that some people felt ill-treated. It was very messy, very public falling out.
And then there's African Parks. This one is even more serious, isn't it?
Much more serious. So, Harry was on the board of African Parks, which is a major conservation group. And reports started coming out that rangers who were funded by the charity were abusing the Baka indigenous people in the Congo Basin.
And we're talking about serious abuse.
We're talking about horrific allegations, beatings, torture, sexual assault.
That is just awful.
It is. And Harry faced immense pressure from human rights groups like Survival International, who were calling on him to step down from the board. It completely undercuts his image as a global humanitarian when the organization he helps lead is being accused of these kinds of human rights abuses.
And meanwhile, his family relations are, well, what are they? Are there any relations left?
From all public reporting, they're non-existent. There were reports in late 2025 that Charles had stopped taking his calls altogether. The bank of Dad is well and truly closed. And by all accounts, William and Harry are effectively strangers.
But he's still trying to do some good. He's still trying to do the work.
He is. In September 2025, he and Meghan made a donation of $1.1 million to the UK charity Children in Need. A huge sum of money.
And he's trying to find new causes, right? In October 2025, he signed that open letter about the dangers of AI.
Right, calling for a ban on artificial superintelligence. He's clearly trying to pivot and position himself as a global thought leader, a kind of statesman without a state.
But is the public, particularly the American public, buying it anymore?
Well, the data says no. There was a Ranker poll in October 2025, which is based on millions of votes from the public. Harry was listed as the third most disliked celebrity in the entire U.S.
In the U.S., wow. That was supposed to be his safe haven, the place that embraced him.
That's the danger. He's not just unpopular in Britain anymore, which you might expect. He's becoming a punchline in America. He's been lampooned by South Park, by late-night hosts. The initial shine has definitely worn off.
And that leads us directly to that headline from just a few weeks ago, January 2026, the accusation of disaster tourism.
Yeah, this was painful to watch. The wildfires in Los Angeles were raging. Parts of Pacific Palisades were being evacuated. It was a genuine community tragedy.
And Harry and Meghan showed up.
They went to a local food bank to help pack boxes for displaced families.
Which, on the face of it, is a good thing to do.
In isolation, yes, it's a good thing. But they brought a camera crew with them. Or at the very least, they allowed a photographer to take perfectly lit, professional photos, which were then immediately distributed to the media.
And the reaction online was brutal.
Disaster tourism, that was the phrase that was trending all day. People felt they were using a community tragedy as a PR opportunity to try and rehabilitate their image after all those charity scandals.
It's the ultimate damned if you do, damned if you don't trap, isn't it? If they sit in their mansion in Montecito, people say, I don't care. If they go to the food bank, people say they're just doing it for the cameras.
That is true. But you could argue they built that trap themselves. When you monetize every aspect of your life, when you sell your family's secrets, when you film your most private moments for Netflix, the public eventually stops giving you the benefit of the doubt. Everything starts to look like a transaction.
So after all of this, what does it all mean? We've looked at this entire trajectory, from the grieving little boy walking behind the coffin, to the hero pilot in the Apache, to the fairy tale groom at Windsor, to the litigant in the courtroom.
I think what we are witnessing is a man who desperately wanted to escape the goldfish bowl. He hated the fishbowl. He hated being watched, so he smashed the glass.
No.
But he didn't realize that without the glass, he's just flopping around on the floor for everyone to see. Yeah. He wanted to control the narrative, but to do that, he had to sell the narrative. And once you sell your story, you don't really own it anymore. The public does.
He has his freedom. He got what he said he wanted. He has his financial independence.
He does. But the cost was the very institution that gave him his platform, his purpose, and his name in the first place. Yeah. He is a prince without a kingdom.
It really is the ultimate irony when you think about it. He is the Duke of Sussex, a title given to him by the monarchy, living in a gated American celebrity enclave, fighting battles about U.S. visas and Spotify podcasts, completely estranged from the very thing that makes him Prince Harry.
So the question for the next decade, as he moves from his early 40s towards his late 40s, is a simple one. Can he ever be just Harry? Or is the title, the connection to the thing he left behind, the only thing that keeps the whole show on the road?
And that is the provocative thought we're going to leave you with today. We often talk about the cost of fame, but it's rare that we get to see someone